Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's very kind of you. I would like to enter into the record, if I might be able to at this time, from Safe Minds. It's an organization of people who are affected by autism, and it's testimony submitted for the record on the Committee of Oversight and Government Reform, Subcommittee on Government Operations, hearing of May 20th, 2014. As you know,
without objection, that will be made part of the record. You may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, and you've expressed interest in before, Representative Carolyn Maloney and I introduced H.R. 1757, the Vaccine Safety Act, which calls for the National Institute of Health to conduct a comprehensive study comparing the health outcomes, including the incidence of autism spectrum disorders, between individuals who are vaccinated and those who are unvaccinated. It was announced previously during the April 8th, 2014 Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee meeting that a study of vaccinated versus unvaccinated children is being undertaken under an existing NIH contract with the Lewin Group. While I appreciate that a study is being undertaken, I think it's imperative that it be a little bit more transparent and that the stakeholders should have more participation and input into the process. It's important that all data sets developed as a part of this study at each step in the process be preserved for independent review in the future. I came across a May 15th op-ed by Sally Bernard. Sally is a board member of Autism Speaks and the president of Safe Minds. But more than that, she's a mother of a 26-year-old Bill who has autism. And let me quote from her op-ed. Now a new study of over 2 million children born in Sweden between 1986 and 2006, which has been published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, confirms what Safe Minds and parents have been saying for decades. Children are as much at risk of getting autism from environmental factors as they are from their genetics. The study by Sven Sandin and his colleagues follows on the heels of another landmark study of twins by Håkan Hallemeyer of Stanford, published in 2011, which showed the larger component of autism risk arise from environmental, not heredity factors. Since genes and environment interact to increase autism risks, this means that we're doing something to our children, exposing them to something harmful, either while they are still in utero or during their first months or years of life that is altering their biology. The scientific evidence is overwhelming. Researchers and science policymakers can no longer deny that there is a clear and strong environmental component to the skyrocketing rates of autism. By ignoring the environmental component to autism, the government and scientific community have made a massive strategic error, wasting enormous amounts of money and time in mostly fruitless genetics-only research that has not helped us stop the new causes of autism or help people living with severe autism. This is a quote. "We can fix this. The studies by Sven Sandin and Håkan Hallemeyer can guide us to the end of the autism epidemic. The good news is that the environmental causes of neurological disorders are more easily fixed than genetics. When we invest in uncovering the environmental factors that are causing our autism spectrum disorders, we can remove those factors from our world. We can study how those factors alter biology and identify the treatments that can remediate those pathways. Based on this latest evidence, funders like NIH should be charging scientists with the urgent task of discovering what the environmental causes of autism are. Clinging to outdated paradigms harms our community. To its credit, the NIH's National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences just released a request for proposals on environmental contributors to autism spectrum disorders. To its discredit, the NIH's Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee continues to obstruct environmental initiatives contained in its own strategic plan for autism spectrum research." End of quote. And I left out mentioning any names in there. This is all pretty serious, and when I listen to what others are telling me and what the GAO report says that we'll discuss today, and the data from the May 7th JAMA article, the message is clear. It appears NIH has been ignoring what parents have known for many years. Environmental exposures in utero or early life are changing the biology of children, and I'm out of words, out of time, so I'll pick this up later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Posey, who had unanimous consent to participate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Dr. Insel, let me say that I think you're a good man. You're well qualified for the job, and you have good intentions. And I hope that the discussion about the direction it's going is not something that you're taking personally. You know, some folks, and I'm one of them, believe that the government and the scientific community has made a strategic error by mostly focusing on genetics-only research. I'm just finishing up my opening statement here, basically. It seems NIH is clinging to outdated paradigms, and IACC leadership, for some reason or reasons, has obstructed progress in researching the environmental initiatives that are actually listed in the IACC's own strategic plan. Those have been underfunded, while genetics have been funding at around threefold the recommendation. I'm interested in knowing what, if any, changes Congress and the parents can expect to see from the IACC.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Posey. If I can, just to put this in context, because often there's some confusion about what we mean when we use the term genetics or genomics. If you just put autism aside for the moment, and you look at disorders that we study that are major public health problems that we know have a very clear environmental cause. Lung cancer, asthma, those are two pretty good examples. If you looked into the NIH funding for those, it's heavily dominated by genomics. Now, we know there's an environmental cause for lung cancer, and we know the same for asthma. So what are we doing studying genomics? The reason is because in 2014, genomics isn't about necessarily just finding a cause. It's a tool. It is the engine for discovery. It's given us a way to faster, better, and cheaper figure out mechanisms of disease. And sometimes that takes us in ways and places we had never expected to go. But
okay,
to say that we
my time's running out here. Are mostly the studies that they were talking about being redundant on genomics? Do they have the same goals? Do they have the same metrics? Are they being measured by the same metrics? Are they using the same techniques?
I'm not sure that I'm aware of projects that were thought to be redundant on genomics. In the area of genomics, everything that we do, not just in the United States but around the world, filters into a single site called the Database for Genotypes and Phenotypes, dbGaP. Okay. And so all of that has to be standardized to use exactly the same techniques and to provide the same kind of data.
Thank you. Your job is much broader than simply autism. And in the last 4 years, you are not only director of the National Institutes of Mental Health, but also the acting director of the newly formed National Center for Translational Medicine. Realizing there's only so many hours in a week, a day, I'm curious about how much of your actual time outside of IACC meetings do you spend singularly focused on autism?
That's a great question. My wife asks me that quite a bit, actually, because the hours are there, but on the percent basis, it's not, at this point, the majority of my time. I have lots of other things that I'm responsible for. I have to say that part of the reason I have focused as much as I have on autism for the National Institute of Mental Health is because increasingly we think about this as the prototype.
Okay.
Today we think about schizophrenia, bipolar disorder.
Would you say it's an hour a week, 4 hours a week?
Oh, no. It's got to be more than that. I'd have to sit down and actually look at my calendar, but it's probably tracks pretty well with our funding commitment. It's probably about 10% of our funding, and I suspect it's about 10% of my time.
Okay, and if you find differently, if you'd send a committee back, and
I'll be happy to provide something for the record.
One of the findings of the GAO was the potential for duplicative research, which has been a big topic up here today. Who at the NIH actually makes the final funding decisions on autism research grants?
It's certainly not the IACC. It's the institute directors at the NIH who are responsible for their own budgets. In this case, there are 6 different institutes that have some commitment to autism. 5 of them are on the IACC.
Would you send me a list of them and their names? And
absolutely. We'll provide that for the record.
And their budget amounts.
Yes.
Is there coordination between NIMH, the Child's Health Institute, and other centers and institutes on what will and won't be funded?
Yeah, there's a separate parallel group called the ACC, the Autism Coordinating Committee, which is made up of the program officers at each of those institutes, those and others as well, deafness as well. They get together on a regular basis, at least once a month. They hash through their portfolios, both what they have and what's coming in, and make decisions about what the funding should look like going forward.
Thank you. Will you send me a list of all those players and who they represent?
Absolutely. We'll do that for the record.
I know that before the final decision, there's a review by experts of grant applications. The IACC members do not have grant review authority the way that the typical advisory body for centers and institutes do. It was announced on April 29th in the Federal Register that the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development Special Emphasis Panel, Outcomes in Autism Spectrum Disorders, Mechanisms and Needs Assessment, would be meeting on May 6th in a closed-door meeting to review grants. I'm wondering who serves on this and other special emphasis panels that review the body of autism grant applications at the NIH.
There are 2 tiers of review at the NIH. One is the one you just described, which is the level of usually scientific experts, but sometimes public members as well, to look at scientific merit for the grants that come in and to rank them. The second tier is that then goes to a body called the Advisory Council, and each institute has one of these. They go through that entire list with people from program, look at both scientific merit, public health needs, and also programmatic balance, and help the institute director to make a final decision about what should get funded.
Thank you. Would you please provide me in writing the name and staff positions so I can kind of get that straight on a chart?
Right. We can lay that out for you. Would you like that for the institutes that handle autism research?
Everybody that touches it.
So that would be the members of council for each of those institutes. It's actually public record.
Both layers, yeah.
Well, so I should just clarify that the review committees, of which there are several, in this case, the one that you referenced is what's called a special emphasis panel.
Correct.
So that's put together for just this particular review on this particular request for applications. We can certainly provide you with those names. Those are, of course, public. But we'll get you that for all of the recent requests for applications. We just had 3 for NIMH, and we'll make sure you have those names.
Thank you. It just wasn't in our package, and so it may be available, but you know, you can put your finger on it in 5 minutes and take my staff 5 days, just as a practical matter.
It's not worth 5 days. We'll get it to you.
Okay. Would you please provide that list, their bios and CVs and financial disclosure forms?
And again, all of that is public record for government employees and the institute directors and council members. All of that is available for members of special emphasis panels. I'd have to check to find out whether they are vetted in the same way in terms of their financial disclosures. I believe they are, but I actually have to look at that, and we'll let you know that for the record.
Okay, thank you. Are there any parents of individuals with autism included in the review process?
Well, at NIMH, we've had a tradition of doing that all the way from the ERA funding, where they were a large part of the review, to now having generally a member, usually a parent, who sits on our council at this point, or sometimes it's actually a person affected by the disorder. The most recent parent of a person with autism was Portia Iverson, who sat on the NIMH Council until about 2 years ago. This rotates around, so the other public members I don't know that right now, we do have one parent of a person with autism, but that's not something that is public. But the people are chosen to serve partly to provide that kind of perspective. Now, this is at the high level. This is at the council level that's making the final decisions on an advisory basis.
Yeah. Somebody from Autism Speaks, for example, what would be their odds of being on that review panel?
So for that first level, Tier 1 scientific review, there's if they don't have a conflict with applications coming in, we're always looking for people who can bring scientific expertise to that discussion. At the second level, at the higher tier, Portia Iverson was the founder of Cure Autism Now. So, that's somebody who was deeply involved in the advocacy community. So it's, again, NIMH covers many disorders. It's not just about autism, but we've tried to make sure there's someone with an autism focus on the council so that those grants get a very careful look.
Okay. Have there been any discussions of public grants to balance out the private sector grants?
That's a terrific question, and it's something we haven't talked about so far, but as the NIH funding has gone down about 25% over the last decade in terms of purchasing power, we've been fortunate that there's been an increase in private investment. The Simons Foundation, Autism Speaks, the Autism Science Foundation, those three really making a difference and helping to buffer what has been a very difficult period for the NIH. The way that gets coordinated is through the IACC, so we would love to have members or leadership from each of those private groups on the IACC. They have been there until recently. Rob Ring was just appointed from Autism Speaks, but he has not yet attended any of the meetings that will happen. Because of turnover at both Autism Speaks and Simons Foundation, we've lost their representation, but that's going to be repaired very quickly.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. My time has expired, Mr. Chairman. I hope we do another round. And, please don't mistake me for advocating that we abandon genetic or genomic research. My question was just why the environmental-based research was funded at much less than the recommendation, and the genetic research was funded at 3 times more than the recommendation. What would you recommend to improve the relevance research funded by NIH to families?
Can I get you to unpack that question a little bit to get some sense of...
All right. How many of the therapies currently that are typically used by the autism community have been evaluated by NIH research grants?
There's a robust cohort of efficacy trials looking at a variety of interventions, both behavioral and biomedical interventions, pharmacological, and devices. But as you probably know, the range of what's being used in the community is vast. And in the absence of anything that seems to truly work in randomized controlled trials that has been shown to be effective and rapid and accessible, people are reaching for all kinds of things. So we do have effective behavioral interventions. At this point in 2014, remarkably, we have no pharmacological treatment for the core symptoms of autism, and that is extraordinary.
Yeah, okay. Some years ago, NIH staff informed this committee that a chelation study would be conducted to evaluate its benefits in children who test for high levels of heavy metals like lead, mercury, and cadmium. Do you know if that was ever conducted?
I know that there was a proposal to do such a study in the NIMH intramural program, and my recollection of that, this is many years ago, was that it did not make it through the institution review board process, that the IRB felt that it was difficult to do that study under the ethical constraints based on the information they had.
Okay. The previous question about the research grants, could you also give us a list of those?
I'm sorry, just to clarify the question about research grants, a list of...
On therapies currently typically used by the autism community. You said there were a number
absolutely.
of them.
And again, all that information is also in this tome that has recently come out from that it looks at the accountability of the strategic plan. I should, because I didn't respond directly to your question about the proportion of the budget that's going to genetics versus environment. In the realm of looking at environmental risk factors, more than half is either on the environment, specifically on gene-environment interactions, or epigenetics, which is a mechanism by which the environment would have that impact. So that's in excess of $30 million that go into that area.
Okay. And this is just out of curiosity. Has NIMH or NIH funded studies looking at the use of vitamin B6 in children with autism? Are you aware of that?
I'd love to take a look at that for the record and let you know. I don't know offhand of such a study.
There's a question of why there haven't been studies of whether autism prevalence is higher in children who received versus did not receive one of the 7 vaccines administered in the first year of life, and how you can legitimately state that vaccines don't cause autism studies until the actual studies are conducted. And I'm not saying you, I'm saying anyone, you know, that's not a personal statement. You know, put aside all the criticisms about how to do the study. Where do you come down on that?
Well, this may be again a place where GAO might have suggested that there has been some duplication. There's been an enormous amount of focus on this topic over a long period of time. I have never counted the number of studies, but I know that there's even today, yet another report out, a large meta-analysis out of the University of Sydney, looking at 10 different projects that have looked specifically at this question about the role of vaccines, and again comes up completely empty-handed. There's just no evidence there. So how much more needs to be done there? How much do you want to continue to bang away at that question? Personally, I think the environment's an important factor here, but it's probably going to be prenatal, not in the first or second year of life.
Well, are you aware of any studies that we've done that have not been tarnished by the touch of Paul Thorson, that conclusively have done a blind study of versus vaccinated versus unvaccinated?
Well, those are two different questions. There's been an enormous amount of epidemiological work, not just in the United States, but around the world. And part of what the report out of Sydney describes is that effort. The question about doing a prospective vaccinated versus unvaccinated clinical trial came up at a previous hearing, and I think that's going to be a tough one to get through an institution review board to tell parents in a random way that you are not going to be allowed to vaccinate children.
Let's stop it right there, because every time we've ever talked about doing one of those studies, some idiot in the media says I'm suggesting that children intentionally don't get vaccinated. And I don't know that anybody has ever proposed that. But there are plenty of children whose parents will not allow them to be vaccinated. There are plenty of cultures where children are not vaccinated. And there are other reasons children aren't vaccinated. And there are children who take large doses of vaccination, and children whose parents decide to have them take one vaccination at a time to avoid thimerosal. And I've not been able to ascertain that there's actually been a legitimate study done that wasn't tainted by the touch of the international colossal scumbag Paul Thorson.
Well, perhaps I can reassure you a little bit on that score. I agree with you that there are a lot of parents today who are choosing not to vaccinate, and that does provide maybe the unenviable opportunity to ask, does that matter? We are trying to do that through a very large study of 35,000 families with autism in a very large healthcare system, where some of the families have decided, when they have a child with autism, not to vaccinate their next child. Mm-hmm. And the question will be, does that, two questions actually. A, does that make a difference? Does that next child have a greater or lesser possibility of developing autism if they are not vaccinated? And the second question is, are they more likely to develop preventable medical illnesses as a result? I guess the other question I keep wondering for myself, since we've already done this, we don't have the data yet, but we will very soon, is if the results come out negative again, will people accept that answer?
Absolutely. If it's a transparent, bona fide study, I think no matter where people fall on the issue, what side, they would be relieved at a credible, transparent conclusion. Yes, I think everyone would be relieved regardless of what the results are. They just want to see a straight arrow, bona fide examination, study, and conclusion. And I don't think they want anybody to invent anything. I mean, I've talked to, hundreds of mothers personally, and I'm sure there's thousands and maybe millions that I haven't talked to who have said, my child, usually a little boy, was absolutely perfectly normal till the day after he got his vaccinations. And through a related career, I've got a little bit of experience with mercury. And, I know that if we find mercury in our fish, we shouldn't eat them. And I think that the spectrum causes are very wide. I think this is one of them. I think genetic enhanced foods are one of them. I mean, we change the genetics of what we eat and don't expect it to change our genetics. I mean, there's so many things. I think pollution goes into it. I mean, we know that it harms children who eat lead pipes. I mean, clearly that where children have eaten lead off the pipes, it's harmed the children. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it, but one heavy reason that I hear often about is the thimerosal and the vaccinations, and I think it would be great if the government, who's here to do good things for people, would take that off the table, but not in a way that we met and we did this and we did that, but in a very public way, in a very transparent way. You could, I think, remove that question forever with just one decent, highly qualified, respected study.
Sir, if you'll permit me, as soon as we get the data in a form that has been accepted for publication, I'd love to sit down with you and go through them, and we can do that.
I'll look forward to it.
One-to-one, and let you see what that looks like. I'm interested to see it myself, and we'll know that, I think, in the next 3 months.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, let me go over a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.